The galaxy was in chaos. Across distant worlds, alien civilizations faced destruction at the hands of a terrifying new enemy. These creatures, known as the Ravagers, were unlike anything the universe had seen. Their attack was relentless and swift, leaving entire species in ruins. No matter how advanced the alien fleets or how powerful the defenses, the Ravagers kept coming. The leaders of the galaxy's largest civilizations knew they were losing. The Ravagers had a terrifying ability. They adapted to every weapon, every tactic, and every defense used against them. They didn't just attack. They learned, evolved, and grew stronger with each battle. The aliens couldn't stop them. In desperation, the leaders of the galaxy turned to an unlikely source for help. They needed warriors, but not just any warriors. They needed the toughest species in the galaxy, humans. Stories of humanity's survival on Earth, a planet filled with deadly creatures and harsh environments, had spread across the stars. The humans were known for their strength, their resourcefulness, and their ability to thrive where no other species could. They were survivors, fighters, and the galaxy's last hope. A message was sent across the stars, reaching the ears of humanity. A call for help. The Ravagers were too powerful for any of the alien species to handle alone. The galaxy's civilizations were on the brink of collapse, and only humans, the Deathworlders, could save them. On Earth, the news came as a surprise. Humanity had faced its own challenges in the past, but this was different. This wasn't a fight for survival on their own planet. This was a fight to save the galaxy. The government quickly assembled a team of elite soldiers, humans trained to survive on Earth's deadliest environments. These men and women had endured harsh deserts, frozen tundras, dangerous jungles, and savage predators. They were the best of the best. Led by Captain Zane Valor, a battle-hardened leader with a reputation for getting the job done, this team was ready for anything. Captain Valor gathered his team in a secure facility. The mission ahead was unlike any they had ever faced. They weren't going to fight on Earth, but on alien worlds, against an enemy they knew little about. All they had was the alien plea for help, and the promise that humanity's reputation as the galaxy's toughest warriors was their only hope. "Let's show them what humans are made of," Zane said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The team looked at each other, ready for the unknown. They had survived the deadliest conditions on Earth. Now, they would have to survive the unknown horrors of the galaxy. With their weapons, their training, and their unbreakable will, the Deathworlders were about to set foot into a conflict that would change the fate of the universe. The galaxy had called for humanity's Deathworlder heroes, and they were ready to answer. The Deathworlders arrived at a strange planet, the central hub of the galaxy's last hope. It was a world unlike any they had seen before. The sky was filled with strange purple clouds, and the ground seemed to vibrate with energy. The air was thick with a strange metallic taste. It was clear that this world was not meant for humans. But that didn't matter. They had been called here to fight, and fight they would. The team was briefed about the enemy they would face. The Ravagers were not just a group of mindless beasts. They were an advanced force, a sentient swarm. They could adapt to anything thrown at them. Weapons, tactics, even the environment. Nothing could stop them. They were perfect predators. "These Ravagers are unlike any enemy we fought before," Zane said, looking over the data with a focused expression. "They're not just stronger than us. They're smarter too. But we're not here to lose. We're here to win." The Deathworlders, though nervous, were determined. They had survived worse. Back on Earth, they had faced creatures that could tear a man apart with a single swipe, environments so harsh that even the strongest couldn't last. But they had adapted. They had become stronger. Their first task was to meet the alien leaders who had sent the call for help. The aliens were a mix of species, some humanoid, some insect-like, some almost completely mechanical. They all seemed frightened, but they didn't show it. They were not used to dealing with fear in front of others. "The Ravagers will not stop until we are all dead," One of the alien leaders, a tall, thin creature with glowing blue eyes, said, "We have lost many worlds, many people. We have no hope left, except for you." Zane looked around the room at his team. He saw the tension in their faces, the uncertainty in their eyes. But he also saw the fire in them. These soldiers were ready for anything. "We didn't come here to fail," Zane replied. "We came here to win, and we'll do whatever it takes." The plan was simple. They would strike first, with a surprise attack. The Ravagers' forces were still spread across the galaxy, attacking one planet at a time. They hadn't expected an organized defense. The humans would hit them hard before they could adapt. Zane and his team spent hours preparing. They analyzed the alien technology, learned how to use it, and figured out how to build weapons that would work against the Ravagers. They didn't have the luxury of time. The Ravagers were already moving in, and every second counted. As they suited up in their armor, ready for battle, Zane gave his final orders. "Remember, we fight to survive. We fight to win. These aliens are counting on us. Let's show them what humanity can do." The team boarded their transport ship, a sleek craft that would take them to the front lines. The engines hummed as the ship lifted off the ground, and the team looked out the window at the alien world below. They were about to step into the unknown, but they were ready. They had trained for this. They had faced worse. And now, they would fight the Ravagers. The Deathworlders landed on the outskirts of an alien city, its towering spires reaching toward the dark sky. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The team, armed and ready, stepped out of their transport ship. The world around them felt alien, hostile, but it was nothing they hadn't faced before. They had trained for this. Zane surveyed the landscape, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "Stay alert," he ordered, his voice steady. "We're in their territory now." The mission was clear: find the Ravagers and engage them before they could launch another attack. The team moved in formation, their boots crunching on the ground as they navigated through the darkened streets. There was no sign of life, no alien inhabitants to be seen. But Zane knew better than to think it was safe. The Ravagers had a way of blending into the environment, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the alien city. The tension grew with every step, the silence oppressive. The only sounds were the hum of their equipment and the occasional rustling of leaves from the distant trees. The Deathworlders were used to danger, but this felt different. It was as if the very planet was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. Then, without warning, the ground shook. A loud, guttural sound echoed through the air, followed by a screech that made the hair on the back of Zane's neck stand up. The Ravagers had arrived. They came from the shadows, massive biomechanical creatures, their bodies covered in hard armor-like plating. Their eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and their movements were fast, jerky, as though they were controlled by a single mind. The Ravagers didn't need to speak. Their actions spoke for them. They were here to kill. The first wave of Ravagers charged forward with a terrifying speed. Zane's team reacted instantly, weapons raised, guns firing. The Deathworlders had trained for this: fast reflexes, quick thinking, and relentless aggression. The Ravagers, however, seemed to anticipate their every move, dodging bullets and countering with powerful strikes of their own. Their armor absorbed the blasts, and their claws tore through the Deathworlders' shields like paper. Zane ducked behind a ruined wall as a Ravager's talon swiped inches from his face. He knew they couldn't keep fighting in the open. "Retreat," he shouted, signaling the team to fall back. "Fall back to the ship. We need a new plan." The team fired a last volley at the Ravagers, slowing them down just enough to make it to the ship. They were quick, but not fast enough to avoid the Ravagers completely. A soldier, Lieutenant Kara, was struck by a Ravager's tail and thrown across the street. She barely managed to roll to her feet before another Ravager lunged toward her. "Get her out of there," Zane shouted, his voice sharp. Two soldiers rushed to Kara's side, pulling her to safety just as the Ravagers closed in. Zane's mind raced. They needed to regroup, find a weakness, and fast. Once they were inside the transport ship, Zane's heart pounded in his chest. The mission had gone horribly wrong. The Ravagers weren't just powerful, they were almost impossible to defeat. And yet, Zane's resolve didn't waver. He had seen humanity face worse odds. He knew that no matter how strong the enemy was, the Deathworlders would find a way to win. "We'll go back," Zane said, his voice low but determined. "We're not done yet. We'll figure this out. We'll take them down." The team nodded. They had just seen the true power of the Ravagers, but they hadn't given up. Not yet. Back at the central hub, the Deathworlders regrouped. Their first encounter with the Ravagers had left them shaken, but not broken. They had taken losses, but their determination to fight remained strong. Zane knew that they couldn't face this enemy alone. The Ravagers were too powerful, too smart, and too numerous. They needed help, and not just any help. They needed allies. The team spent hours in strategy meetings with the alien leaders, trying to figure out a way to stand a chance against the Ravagers. Some of the aliens were hesitant, fearful of the humans' aggressive tactics, but others were desperate enough to listen. Zane saw that the galaxy's leaders were on the edge of despair. Their forces were spread too thin, and the Ravagers were overwhelming them with each new attack. "The Ravagers will never stop," said Kren, a tall, insectoid leader with sharp mandibles and glowing eyes. "We cannot defeat them. Our weapons are useless against them. But you, humans, you survived on a death world. You are the only ones who can stand against them." Zane and his team exchanged glances. They had fought against creatures that had killed other soldiers with ease. They had faced natural disasters that could wipe out entire cities. But this was something different. Still, they weren't ready to give up. "We'll need everything you've got," Zane said, his voice firm. "Your technology, your people, and your knowledge. If we're going to win this, we need to work together." The alien leaders reluctantly agreed to form an alliance. The humans would teach them how to fight like Deathworlders, guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and relentless assault. In return, the aliens would share their advanced technology with the Deathworlders. It was a fragile alliance, born out of desperation, but it was their only hope. Over the next few days, the team trained with their new allies. The Deathworlders taught them how to move through the wilderness without making a sound, how to trap enemies using their own environment, and how to fight back against overwhelming odds. The aliens, in turn, introduced the humans to their advanced weaponry, a combination of energy weapons and defensive shields. It was clear that the humans' brutal tactics and the aliens' high-tech weaponry made for a deadly combination. Zane saw that the alien leaders were slowly starting to believe in humanity's abilities. The team's relentless training and their refusal to back down had earned their respect. The aliens began to see the humans not just as warriors, but as saviors, beings who could turn the tide of war. Still, not all the aliens were convinced. Some believed that the Ravagers were too powerful to be beaten. "It's a waste," one of the alien commanders argued. "We're just delaying the inevitable. The Ravagers will find a way to defeat us all." Zane wasn't ready to accept that. He had fought too many battles where defeat seemed certain, only to come out victorious. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice steady. "We'll fight until the last breath, and we'll find a way to win." With new weapons, new strategies, and a growing sense of unity among the different species, the Deathworlders were ready for the next step. The Ravagers would be harder to defeat than anything they had faced before, but they had one thing that the enemy didn't: humanity's unyielding will to survive. And that, Zane knew, was enough. The alliance between the Deathworlders and the alien species was finally starting to show results. Zane and his team had trained their new allies in guerrilla tactics, using the alien world's terrain to their advantage. The Ravagers, though powerful and deadly, weren't prepared for the kind of fight humanity brought to the table. While the Ravagers were all about overwhelming their enemies with force and brute strength, the Deathworlders knew how to survive, adapt, and fight in ways that made them unpredictable. Zane stood with his team, overlooking a battlefield that had once been an alien city. The team was getting ready for another assault. This time, they were going to take the fight to the Ravagers. "We've trained for this," Zane said, looking at his soldiers. "This is our edge. We know how to fight on worlds that want to kill us. Now we'll show them what humanity can do." Their first test was an ambush. The Deathworlders had spent weeks studying the Ravagers, learning their tactics and weaknesses. While the Ravagers adapted quickly to most attacks, they had one big flaw. When they were forced to fight on unfamiliar ground, they became disorganized. They couldn't adapt as fast as the Deathworlders, who had lived through some of the most dangerous environments in the universe. The plan was simple. The Deathworlders and their alien allies would lure a group of Ravagers into a narrow canyon. Once they were deep inside, the Deathworlders would spring the trap. It was risky, but Zane knew it was their best chance. The Ravagers had to be broken. The team set up explosives, rigged the canyon walls with traps, and prepared to lure the Ravagers in. Everything had to go perfectly. One mistake, and they could all be wiped out. The ambush began. The Deathworlders moved swiftly, luring the Ravagers into the canyon. The Ravagers, relentless and confident, followed the bait. But what they didn't expect was the hidden force waiting for them. Zane's team unleashed their traps. Explosions ripped through the canyon, and the walls came crashing down, trapping the Ravagers inside. But the battle wasn't over. The Ravagers fought back fiercely. Their armored bodies were tough, but they couldn't escape the traps that had been set. The Deathworlders charged in, using their speed and strength to take down the Ravagers one by one. The aliens, now trained in human tactics, fought with a brutal efficiency that surprised even Zane. The combination of human resourcefulness and alien technology turned the tide in their favor. Zane watched as the last Ravager was taken down. His team had done it. They had won their first real battle against the Ravagers. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. "We're not done yet," Zane said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But this is what we came here to do. We fight, we adapt, and we survive." The Ravagers had underestimated humanity's ability to fight and survive. They had thought that their power would be enough to crush the Deathworlders. But now they knew better. Humanity's edge was something the Ravagers couldn't understand. The Deathworlders weren't just fighters. They were survivors. And in the galaxy, survival was everything. Zane looked at his team, proud of what they had accomplished. They had just taken the first step in defeating the Ravagers. And as long as humanity kept fighting, the Ravagers would never win. The victory in the canyon was a small but significant step for the Deathworlders and their alien allies. It proved that humanity's edge, survival instincts honed in the harshest conditions, could hold its ground against the Ravagers. But Zane knew that the Ravagers weren't just going to roll over. They would adapt, and the next fight would be harder. The Ravagers had taken their first loss. The Deathworlders had hit them hard, but Zane could already feel the storm coming. The Ravagers were not just mindless killers. They were thinkers. They would find a way to get smarter, to hit back harder. The team had no time to rest. They had to stay ahead of the Ravagers, constantly moving, constantly learning. Zane gathered his soldiers and the alien leaders for a meeting. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady, but with an edge of urgency. "The Ravagers won't stop. They'll adapt to our tactics. We need to hit them harder, faster, before they can change." The plan was to take the fight to the heart of the Ravagers' forces. Intelligence gathered from the last battle showed that the Ravagers had a central command station on a nearby moon. If they could destroy that, they would cripple the Ravagers' coordination and stop them from organizing new attacks. It was risky. The Ravagers had fortified the moon, and it was heavily guarded. But the Deathworlders had learned something important from the ambush. The Ravagers couldn't adapt as fast as they thought. They still needed time to adjust their tactics. The key was speed. Hit them before they could change their strategy. Zane and his team suited up for the mission. The transport ship was prepared, and the alien allies had supplied them with advanced technology to give them an edge. The team moved out, their hearts pounding as they flew toward the Ravager moon. As they approached, the atmosphere in the transport grew tense. The plan was to infiltrate the moon's surface under the cover of darkness. Once there, they would plant explosives around the Ravager's command center and then retreat before the enemy had a chance to counterattack. The team dropped onto the surface of the moon with precision, moving quickly and silently through the rocky landscape. The Ravager's defenses were strong, but not strong enough to detect the Deathworlders' movements. They were experts at surviving in hostile environments, and this moon was no different. But as they approached the Ravager base, something went wrong. The Ravagers had expected them. A loud alarm blared across the base, and the ground trembled as Ravager soldiers flooded out from hidden tunnels. Zane's heart raced as his team scrambled into position. The Ravagers had anticipated their move, and now they were prepared for a fight. "We've been compromised," Zane shouted, signaling the team to engage. "Get those explosives set. We have to finish this mission." The Deathworlders fought fiercely, using their knowledge of the terrain and their advanced training to push the Ravagers back. The aliens fought beside them, but the Ravagers were relentless. For every Ravager that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The team moved quickly, planting explosives on key structures, but the Ravagers weren't making it easy. Zane's heart raced as he heard the countdown in his earpiece. The explosives were set to go off in 5 minutes, but there were too many Ravagers closing in. The team was surrounded. "We need to fall back," Zane yelled. "Now." With no time to waste, the Deathworlders fought their way to the extraction point, but the Ravagers were closing in fast, and the escape was becoming more difficult with every passing second. The countdown continued, and Zane's mind raced. They couldn't fail. If they did, it would be the end. The explosives were the key to crippling the Ravagers' command, but they couldn't afford to be surrounded. Zane's heart pounded in his chest as he signaled for a final push. The team sprinted toward the extraction zone, hoping the explosives would give them the edge they needed to escape. The countdown echoed in Zane's earpiece, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. The Deathworlders and their alien allies fought with everything they had, but the Ravagers were everywhere. Their heavy footsteps shook the ground, and their deadly, glowing eyes seemed to be everywhere. Zane's team was outnumbered, and retreat was the only option left. "Move, move, move," Zane shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. He sprinted forward, leading his soldiers through the chaos. Behind him, the alien allies held their ground, firing energy blasts and using their advanced shields to keep the Ravagers at bay. But it wasn't enough. The Ravagers were too numerous and too powerful. The team's transport ship was still a few kilometers away, and Zane knew they didn't have much time. The explosives they had planted were set to go off in less than 3 minutes, and they couldn't afford to be caught in the blast. "Lieutenant Kara, keep pushing forward," Zane called out to one of his soldiers, who was lagging behind, firing at the Ravagers. "We need to get to the ship now." Kara nodded and sprinted forward, her weapon blasting as she ran. The team's escape was a mad dash across the moon's barren surface, and every step felt like a lifetime. The Ravagers were closing in, and every corner they turned, they were met with more of the deadly creatures. Zane's mind raced. They had a plan, but the Ravagers were changing it. They had never expected this level of resistance. He had seen human soldiers face impossible odds before, but this was something different. The Ravagers didn't fight to win. They fought to destroy, to erase everything in their path. And the Deathworlders had become the target. The team reached the edge of the moon's rocky terrain, and the transport ship was in sight. But there was a problem. The ship had been surrounded. Ravagers had already set up a perimeter, their heavy weapons ready. They had anticipated the Deathworlders' escape. Zane's heart dropped as he saw the situation unfold before him. The team was trapped. "We're not making it out of here," Kara said, panting, her voice filled with disbelief. "Don't say that," Zane snapped, his eyes scanning the area. "We'll fight our way through. We just need to get close enough to board." The team, despite the odds, was not ready to give up. They had trained for moments like this, moments when the odds seemed impossible, but there was still a chance. Zane's mind raced as he took in the situation. The Ravagers were spread out in a tight circle around the ship, blocking any path to safety. But there was one opening, a narrow gap between two Ravagers, where they could make a run for it. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. "Follow me," Zane ordered, leading the charge. He sprinted forward, using his knowledge of Deathworld combat to dodge blasts and strike when the Ravagers least expected it. The team followed, fighting with everything they had. Explosions went off in the distance as their alien allies provided cover, but the Ravagers were relentless. They closed in with every step the Deathworlders took. Finally, they reached the opening. Zane and his team dove toward the transport ship, firing their weapons to keep the Ravagers back. The doors to the ship opened just in time, and the team rushed inside. "Go, go, go," Zane shouted to the pilot, who immediately activated the ship's engines. The ship lifted off the ground, but they weren't out of danger yet. The Ravagers were still firing, and the ship was shaking from the blasts. The countdown timer on the explosives in the moon's core reached 0. An explosion so powerful it shook the entire moon erupted in the distance. The shockwave rattled the ship, but it kept climbing. The Ravagers' command center was no more. "We did it," Kara breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. Zane allowed himself a brief moment of relief before his mind turned to the next phase of their plan. The battle was far from over, and the Ravagers wouldn't let their defeat go unpunished. But for now, they had struck a blow. The Deathworlders had survived another day. The team flew back to their base, the silence in the transport ship heavy after the chaos they had just escaped. Zane stared out at the stars, his mind racing with what had just happened. The explosion on the Ravagers' moon had been a success, but the cost had been high. Several soldiers were injured, and their escape had been barely clean. Despite the victory, Zane knew the Ravagers wouldn't take this lying down. They would come for revenge, and when they did, they would be much more prepared. As the ship entered the atmosphere of their home planet, the team began to regroup, their tired eyes reflecting the weight of the battle they had just survived. Zane met with the alien leaders and his own soldiers in the command room. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only the cold reality of war. "We've hurt them," Zane began, addressing the room. "But we can't get comfortable. The Ravagers won't give up easily. They're coming, and we need to be ready." Kren, the insectoid leader, nodded. "We've seen their response in the past. They adapt quickly to failure. They won't make the same mistake twice." Zane turned to his team. "We've proven we can strike when they least expect it. But now we need to keep them on their toes. We need to hit them hard, wherever they go, and not let up. The next strike might be their last chance to destroy us, and we can't let them succeed." The plan was set. They would hit the Ravagers again, this time harder and with more precision. They would target key Ravager colonies scattered throughout the galaxy, focusing on their supply lines and resources. The goal was to weaken them until they could no longer mount an effective counterattack. However, as Zane and his team prepared for their next mission, something unexpected happened. The Ravagers didn't just retaliate with another attack. They launched a full-scale counteroffensive, sweeping across several worlds at once. Zane watched in shock as the first reports came in. The Ravagers had learned from their defeat. They had reorganized their forces and were attacking with new tactics, more organized and far deadlier than before. "We underestimated them," Zane said under his breath. "They've adapted faster than we thought." The Ravagers had hit the outer colonies, striking with terrifying speed and overwhelming force. The aliens who had once thought themselves safe were now fighting for their lives. The Deathworlders had to act fast, or they risked losing everything. Zane rallied his team once more. "We're not going to sit back and wait for them to come to us. We go to them. We take the fight to the Ravagers' new front lines. We'll use everything we've learned and everything we've got." The team wasn't ready to give up. They had learned to survive, and now they would make sure the Ravagers knew exactly who they were dealing with. The Deathworlders had seen the worst the galaxy could throw at them, and had never stopped fighting. The Ravagers would learn the same lesson: underestimate humanity, and you'd regret it. As they geared up for the next mission, Zane could feel the weight of the challenge ahead. This time, there would be no escape. The Deathworlders had only one choice: fight until the end. The war with the Ravagers had reached its breaking point. After weeks of fierce fighting, Zane and his team were on the front lines, facing the enemy they had pushed to the brink of defeat. But the Ravagers were more dangerous than ever, learning from their losses and adapting with terrifying speed. It was clear now. The final battle had arrived. Whoever won this fight would control the galaxy's future. Zane stood on the command deck, staring at the massive battle map laid out in front of him. The Deathworlders had gathered their forces, human soldiers and alien allies, ready for one final push. The Ravagers had fortified their stronghold on the planet Terath, and it was there that the last stand would take place. If they could destroy the Ravagers' central leadership, the rest of their forces would crumble. But getting there wouldn't be easy. "We have one chance," Zane said, his voice steady but heavy with determination. "If we don't succeed, we're done. The Ravagers will wipe us out." Kren, the alien leader, glanced at the map and nodded. "We have nothing left to lose, but we fight with everything we have. This is our last chance, too." The Deathworlders had learned the Ravagers' weaknesses. They knew how to exploit the terrain, how to fight with speed and surprise. But the Ravagers had adapted. They had built massive fortifications, and their numbers had grown. The final assault would be unlike any battle they had fought before. Zane's team would lead the charge, using their training and instincts to cut through the Ravagers' defenses. But they would need to act fast. "We strike at dawn," Zane ordered. "We'll hit their outer defenses first, and then move in. We're going to take this planet back." As the team prepared for the mission, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The soldiers checked their weapons, the aliens prepped their shields, and everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for freedom. The galaxy's fate rested on their shoulders. The night before the battle, Zane found a quiet moment to reflect. He stood on the ship's observation deck, looking out at the distant stars. The weight of the war pressed down on him, but he wasn't about to back down now. He had seen humanity face impossible odds and overcome them. He had seen his team rise to every challenge, and he knew they wouldn't stop now. When dawn came, the battle began. Zane and his team led the charge, moving quickly through the Ravagers' outer defenses. Explosions rocked the ground as the Deathworlders launched their assault, forcing the Ravagers back. The fight was brutal. Every step was hard-earned, every inch of ground contested. But the Deathworlders pushed forward, using every tactic they had learned to stay one step ahead. They reached the heart of the Ravagers' stronghold, where their command center was located. The final objective was in sight, but the Ravagers weren't giving up without a fight. Zane led his team into the command center, battling their way through Ravager forces. Every corner turned brought more enemies, but Zane and his soldiers fought with everything they had. Finally, they reached the Ravager leader. A towering creature, cloaked in dark armor, stood before them. It hissed in fury, its eyes glowing with rage. "You think you can defeat us? We are the end of your kind," the Ravager leader sneered. But Zane was ready. "No, this is the end of you." With a roar, Zane and his team launched their final assault, pushing the Ravager leader back. The battle raged on, But the tide was turning. The Ravagers' leadership was falling, and their forces were starting to collapse. With one final strike, the Ravager leader fell. The enemy forces scattered, their will to fight broken. The Deathworlders had won. As Zane stood over the fallen leader, he looked around at his team. They had done it. The Ravagers were defeated, and the galaxy was free once more. "We did it," Kara said, her voice filled with disbelief. Zane smiled, exhaustion and relief washing over him. "Yeah, we did." The Deathworlders had proven that no matter how impossible the odds, they would always fight, and they would always survive.